What's up, Dream Builder? Are you someone who's interested in creating a life by your design through all things real estate? Well, I can assure you, you are in the right place. Join me, your host, Casanova Brooks. I'm an award-winning real estate agent and investor as we uncover the top tips, strategies, and the mindset of the top real estate entrepreneurs across the world. Stay locked in because we're about to go on a journey that will change your life. What's up, Dream Builder? We are back again, and we have an episode that I'm excited to bring to you because we have the legendary, as I would like to think, Miss Tina Beliveau on the show. Tina, you want to go ahead and say what's up to DreamNation?
Hey, DreamNation. I'm Tina. So glad to be here and share my experiences in the real estate space. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a fun one. Now, I know that you've been crushing it over in the Baltimore area, which is where my team found you, and you have a great message. For anyone that is not familiar with who you are, let's go ahead and let's take it back to the golden days, your young days. But the way that I always like to say it is I consider us as real estate entrepreneurs just like superheroes. Why? Is because we're constantly flying around the world or even our cities, and we're trying to solve the biggest problems. And so we know behind every Superman, there's a Clark Kent, and behind every Superwoman, I think her name was Princess Diana, if I'm correct. Does that sound right? I'm pretty sure that was her name.
It sounds right. So let's go with it.
Let's go with it. I'm pretty sure that was her name. But anyway, tell us behind the superhero that we know today as Tina Beliveau, who is that Superwoman?
Taking it back. So I've been in the industry since 2005. Actually, I've been in the industry since really 2003. So I'm a Baltimore local, have always been here. And I got into real estate my freshman year in college, just as like a side job. I had a family friend who was really successful and she needed an assistant. And I was like, sure. And the rest was just kind of history. I worked for her all through college, learned a ton from her, really powerful mentor. And then I graduated in 2007, which seemed like a great time to get into the industry. Didn't know the market was going to change so much. And I've been full-time ever since then and cut my teeth in the great downturn of 2008 through 2012, which taught me a lot. Very humble beginnings. I was basically 21 when I became full-time. And although I was local and knew people, like my whole network was living at home, let alone maybe renting. Nobody was buying or listing. So really like building my network and my database from the beginning was that starting point. And it looks very different today. More than people realize.
and it definitely does. You talked about 2007, and I think that's relevant today because a lot of people don't know what's to come, but people are expecting some type of a downturn or at least a correction. Maybe we don't have a recession like we did, but a correction. For anybody right now that's thinking about getting into real estate, would you say that it's still a great time to get in, or would you say that maybe they should look at holding off until the market shows you what it's going to do for that next cycle?
Oh, no, I think it's a really good time to get into the business. I think I was actually talking with somebody this morning and they were like, gosh, like, how do you survive as 100% commission? And I think that's the biggest leap. So whether the market is great or whether the market is difficult, I think the thing that people stumble on the most is just getting through that first 6 to 24 months of getting up and running and having consistent income. But even when the market's headed downward, there are people who need to move, and it's just a matter of finding them and learning how to serve them as it relates to what's happening in the market.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And I know that you said you don't do a lot with the investing side, but I think it's still critical that people understand that there's always a good market for someone. And you said it, you just got to find it. If it's all of a sudden downturn and it's a seller's market or a buyer's market, I'm sorry, because everybody needs to sell because of the pandemic, you just got to find those people to have those listings. So I love that you said that.
I have to say, it's funny now that we're talking about this. I haven't thought about it in a little while. I built my business. It was very unbalanced. It was like 80 to 90% buyers for the first 5 years. But the beauty of that was that I learned how to be an amazing buyer agent.
Mm.
And it's great to be a buyer in a buyer's market because I remember when we would go out and look at like 25 houses and I would be like, pick one out. Like now it's let's hope there's one that fits your criteria. It's a nice experience on the buying side when you're in a market like that. And I guess I'll just say like I have high integrity. I put a lot into those relationships and those relationships that I formed. And I think that buyer bond is a little different than the seller relationship. Those are my best relationships to this day. So it was kind of like humble, slow, block by block of building those relationships, but they are the foundation of everything that I do. And people still to this day are like, remember when? And we looked at that and there was water in the basement and you helped us find a different house. Like, I just think there's something about that kind of foundation that like money can't buy, prospecting can't buy. So if we end up in that kind of market, it's nothing to be afraid of. In fact, it can be really meaningful kind of work to do.
Yeah, I would agree. And a lot of the times where people fail to realize, because I started out working with a lot of buyers, I would say my first year, it was probably 75% buyers as well. And so not only do you build those relationships, which are a lot more meaningful a lot of the times because you spend so much more time with those people. But the other part of it is understanding that 3, 5, 7 years from now, those buyers will then become sellers.
Exactly.
And so there you have your listings. You already know that you just have to stick it out through the curve, because if you've done it, those buyers will become sellers and you most likely won't have to compete for that listing if you've kept up and nurtured your relationship with them.
That's exactly right. And that's really what set off my trajectory, because basically it was like 2007 through 2012 where I was very buyer heavy. And then that 5 to 7 year cycle, at least like in my market at that time in the past, was when people started selling. And that was when my listing business just grew and grew. And that's what fueled a team, because I had this book of business that was turning over. Yeah, it's the best way to build, if you ask me.
Yeah. Now let's talk about you decided you were going to start a team. Well, first off, let's talk about for buyer's agents right now, because there's a lot of people, and you said you started out your career buyer heavy and then it turned over for you and you've seen so many things. So for people right now that are thinking about getting into the business, or maybe they're already in the business, but they're not having a lot of success, is there a couple tips that you have to be able to win deals on the buyer side? Because right now it's been heavy on a seller's market. I would imagine, is your market a seller's market?
Oh yeah, we have like a month of inventory right now. So yeah, I think the biggest struggle that agents have is generally a lead generation problem and sometimes a lead conversion problem. Yet I'm also a big believer that if you get in front of enough leads, you'll get better at conversion. So a lot of the time it's just figuring out, how can I get in front of more people? And it's funny, like I say get in front of, and we're in COVID, like it's a little bit different right now. And I've had many conversations with people who are, having that kind of challenge. And I think it's a matter of focusing on growing your database person by person. So whether you're attending, I've been on Zoom networking events that have been awesome. I recently got together a group of people in a park and did a socially distanced networking event. People are still doing open houses. There's a lot of ways to meet people. And I think just like a foundational thing that was instilled in me from some really good training I got when I was new was just to grow my database bigger and bigger, add them faithfully to whatever you're using. It could be Google Contacts, a spreadsheet, or a nice CRM. It doesn't really matter. But the more people that we can add to that list and stay in touch with, it will turn into business. And I think that when you don't have a lot of momentum, it's hard to get that going. And that's where I see people getting stuck. And the thing that I found the most helpful is just to say, find something that you enjoy doing. For me, it's been community service. I'm on some boards and committees. I look for stuff that's fun, that involves other people, and then I just go do it. And then I make sure they get into my database. So if you're really stuck, I would say, what could you do right now, virtual or in real life, that would be fun and interactive, and just find a little bit of momentum and then build on it.
Yeah, I think that's crucial. And I'm glad that you said that. For a lot of people, they think, oh, all I can do is post or talk about real estate. But if you go find those people that are on boards, or you find hobbies and common interests, that opens up the conversation for you to learn about other people, and everybody wants to talk about themselves. And as long as you're more interested than interesting, right? So you're listening more than you're talking, eventually it will open up for you to be able to say what you do. And you say, you know what? I love real estate. Don't even have to say, I'm a realtor. Just say, I love real estate. Everyone loves real estate in some form. HGTV, investing, it doesn't matter. Someone loves real estate in some form. And then they're like, oh, you do real estate. That's where it opens up the conversation. So I'm glad that you said that.
Yeah, if I could just add one
Yeah.
thing, I think part of what's a springboard and what you said of making it happen for people and listening more than you take is like being an organizer has worked really well for me. So whether it's a simple Facebook post, like there was something I put out at the beginning of the pandemic just saying, if any of my friends are business owners and would just like to brainstorm with somebody that has a lot of business experience and you just need some solutions and ideas of what you're going to do right now, reach out to me. So that's just an example of what I'm trying to get at. But I think if you have a skill, and maybe if you're newer in the business and don't have a lot of leads, you might have other areas of expertise, but just being a connector, somebody who puts things together for other people, especially with the pandemic, a lot of people feel stuck and there's nothing to do and nowhere to go and no end in sight. They're not always creating solutions. So when we come to them and say, hey, like I'm doing this networking event for 10 people at a park or whatever, it's like putting something out for people. Like the gratitude that I've gotten for the couple things that I have put together has been very significant. We also just did a client event at a farm and we did this whole thing. It was socially distanced. We only allowed a certain number of people per hour to come. So it was very safe. And people got there and they were like, oh my gosh, thank you for doing this. It's the first time I've come to anything since March. So just find something that you can do to give, serve, or bring joy to other people.
Yeah, no, that's critical, right? You don't always have to have all the answers. Sometimes if you're just the connector, is what I heard you say, you can
Yeah.
bring so much value. People just want to be able to connect with other people. And if you can have that platform, it's amazing. For you, how have you consistently grown your business year over year? Because obviously starting out with buyers and then you have to wait that curve. But what I found that a lot of agents and brokers, eventually they hit a plateau. And we're going to talk about a little bit more of your journey of where you went. But right now, is there one particular strategy that you continuously go back to? Facebook ads or direct mail or open houses? What's your thing?
So my thing is a blend of like database and referral marketing. It's certainly like what comes to me the most easily and is just the most gratifying. Although I've done a lot to add a little bit of a twist to it in the last year or so. But what has been like the mainstay is I've always had a CRM where I put people's contact information in and it was pretty detailed. I have tags and notes and just stuff to remember about them. That's one thing I've always done. The second thing is that I friend everybody I meet on Facebook if I can find them. I don't like wait for permission or anything. I just connect right away.
All of your leads?
Oh yeah, anybody. Yeah, unless I don't know, there's someone I just feel like I would do business with them, but I don't want to connect. But like a benefit of the kind of business that I have is it's a lot of referrals. So I tend to like meet like-minded people a lot of the time. But yeah, I had some people, they were introduced on a group private message on Facebook and I set the listing appointment and then I just friended them. They both accepted like 2 minutes later because I know that people like to stalk, they're curious, and then they now see my timeline and they get the full idea of who I am and all the different things that matter to me. So I've been always a personal Facebook profile person. I haven't done a lot of paid advertising. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just I've never really been as drawn to it. So I've always been somebody that maintains like a very active Facebook presence and now Instagram, but I didn't start spending a lot more time on Instagram until my Facebook was like really solid. So I'm like a big believer in like master one platform. Don't overwhelm yourself. Do one thing that you can win at. And then when you're bored and have more capacity, add the next thing on. So my Facebook's my mainstay. So I friend people and then I just do some really basic content marketing. I do my best to send one really good email out to my database every month. Sometimes it's market info. Sometimes it's an invite to an event. Sometimes it's just like a little bit of an update or a celebration. And then we used to do 4 events a year before the pandemic. We've pivoted. We did some virtual stuff this year. And then the last thing that I'll say, and this has been like a progression over time, is this year I decided to start a private Facebook group for all of our past clients and advocates. So we've got a couple hundred people in there and I wax and wane with how much I put in there. But in the summer, I was doing contests and giving away gift cards to minority owned businesses and restaurants. to support local. And I had this big wheel. It was like a lottery wheel, and I would spin it and it would land on a restaurant. And then I would pick a name out of a hat from a past client who was in the group and give away prizes. So just engaging, giving, staying in front of people, and being fun and light about it, because my marketing used to be a little bit serious. And I've gotten a little bit more personal, especially like being able to use social media. It's just a little bit more of an organic way to connect with people wherever they are. And a lot of my clients post in there and ask questions a lot of the time for contractor referrals. So it's kept the connection going, which I love. So
Yeah. It's got your own little next door community in there.
Yeah. It's budding. And I feel like it, just sort of like a mindset thought on it is we're 6 or 7 months into it now, and it's good. It's really functional. But if I think about things I started 5 years ago and where they are now, it's all about planting those seeds and nurturing. And 5 years from now, maybe there'll be 1,000 people in there. So it's just keeping going with that kind of stuff, even though you don't get that like immediate
gratification.
That's the word. Yeah, I couldn't even think of it.
No, and no, that's still critical though, because the smaller, what's cool about it, and for anybody that's listening or watching right now, if you think about it, the smaller that your group or your email list or whatever is, the more intimate that it can become. Because once you get to 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 people, it's hard to respond to everyone. And you lose a lot of that personal touch, and you want to, but you just don't have the time. And most likely if you've gotten to 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 people, you probably now have that system on maybe a little bit more autopilot. So you're focusing on that next thing. So then people can be like, oh, I'm not noticed as much. So take pride in having 100 to 200 people in anything.
Yeah. Thank you. I go live in there. It's very intimate. Like, that's the perfect word for it. I just sometimes say, hey, like this happened. We just did this for a client. It was unique. Keep us in mind. We've been doing a lot of like off-market matchmaking this year. So I've made a big deal about that.
Explain what that is.
So like just being the connector, because we have a decent past client database, the couple that we've done this year have all been past clients who had a home that fit the criteria of a buyer we were working with, who was struggling to find something because we're in that 1 month inventory situation in the Baltimore market. So we have put out calls to action. Like I'll even put up like a little post in our group or on my public social media saying, hey, we're looking for somebody who owns a home in this specific neighborhood in, this town. If you know of anybody who might entertain a conversation, just connect them with me. And what's funny is both times I've put those on public channels, but the people who responded were my own clients who are following. And then we've double-ended a couple deals, and people are now thinking of us as, oh, wow, like they're really going the extra mile. And we are. It's just that we're storytelling what we are doing that is special. And if you don't do that, no one's going to tell your story for you.
Man, so there's so much wisdom and so much truth in what you just said. I hope somebody that's listening right now, either they take heed if they're a newer agent, that's where they got to get to, or maybe if they already have a solid database, but they're trying to figure out how they can do some double-ended deals and get some more commission, that they can implement something like that into their strategy.
I'll add one more thing to that. Like one mistake that I've made and that I've seen other agents make once they have some level of production is they'll post on social media, another house sold, under contract. And it tends to get very template-y. It's like a picture of the house, the same verbiage, and it doesn't tell the story. So I just realized that I am so guilty of it. I kept resharing those kind of templated things to my Instagram story. And I was like, I have to stop. I need to tell people why this is actually of value to them and stop resharing dumb crap. So now I've just been not going live, but just holding up my phone and saying, I just talked in detail last week about the matchmaking story and said, here's what we're actually doing. And I just know that that's a lot more of a better way to get my message out there. Like people don't want to be like attacked with my marketing over and over again, but they do want to hear the behind the scenes and the inner workings of real estate, because like you said, everybody loves real estate and everyone's constantly fascinated by it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was actually going to be my next question, was you mentioned content marketing. And I was going to see, do you have basically a set agenda of Mondays I post about this, and then Tuesdays I post about this? So like, how do you have any type of plan, or you just try to share your day to day of what's going on in your world?
I'm not super systematic about it, but I've just built a very good muscle memory of posting. One thing that I have done this year, so I currently do all of my own marketing just with where my team is right now. It's easier for me to just do it than outsource it. So we have a system every time a property goes under contract or closes, or if we take a new listing, I get a little task reminder from our task management software. And then I save the images for each property, for each post. And
What
then
task management software do you use?
we use Trello,
Got it. Cool.
it's free. We have a paid version, but it's really great for listing coordination and transaction coordination. I actually have sample Trello boards. If anyone watching this wants to reach out to me, I can share them to you. You can copy our templates. So my little system that has worked really well for me is I just save the images throughout the week. I put them on the desktop of my computer because that just seems to be my little visual system. And then I have a time block on Fridays for an hour to do content. So I use a social media scheduling tool called Later.
Yeah.
You might be familiar. Yeah, it's a really good one. And then I just plan the next week's posts. So they just go out through our Facebook and Instagram. And then as they populate throughout the week, then sometimes I share it and then add the story. Or if I'm totally uninspired, then I just, share the content. But our posting is really consistent now and people comment on it. The other thing that I do that's more of a personal habit is if I'm inspired, I've trained myself, film video. So if something just happened and I'm halfway video ready where I'm not just, I don't know, in sweatpants or something, although it's good to be authentic. But if I feel you know what, I should do a video about this, I just film it right then and there while it's fresh, because I do know that when the inspiration disappears later, it's never going to happen. And I'm never as articulate as when I'm excited and I'm oh my gosh, this morning, we just problem solved this sewer line issue. It's so unsexy, but it was a huge win, saved my client $7,000. I didn't do a video right then and there. And I just remembered, but normally I would have forgotten all about it. So it's when you have that moment of, I just solved a problem for a client, just had that superwoman or rock star moment, capture it while it's fresh. And ideally post it right away, especially if you do story posts, which is my mainstay. And people follow me for my stories more than my grid posts most of the time.
Yeah, no, that's another word right in there. Do it now. There's a lot of things that we think about, but we don't take action on it. And then afterwards, it's man, or you try to recreate it, but just like you said, the energy's not there. And a lot of the times that's what gets people to buy in and keep going from this story to the next story. And, she's on Instagram too. I got to follow her on there. Does she got any more stories like that? So be thinking about that. I think that that's critical. Now, you talked before we started the show, you talked about that you've had a lot of failures in this business. And I think it's easy for a lot of agents to be able to showcase all the successes. They talk about the gross revenue income and how they're doing so great. But we know on the backside of it, there's so many struggles that come in real estate. When you decided that you were going to start a team, right? What struggles did you encounter? Because some people out there right now are saying, hey, I got leads, and I want to grow a team, but I don't really know where to even start with growing my team.
Oh my gosh, let my failure list begin. Seriously, I think team building really stretched me. And I think we all have different personality styles and areas where maybe we're just naturally more successful. For whatever reason, I think just the leadership challenges of team building have probably given me the most heartache over the years. And I think it's a mix of things. I started hiring people when I was 25. So didn't have I had no leadership experience or training. So I was just learning by doing. And that's just sometimes not the most efficient way to learn. It's still a good one, but I'm just making the mistakes, learning from them, and then assessing the next step. So I remember, I think I had a part-time assistant, and then I think my first full-time assistant hire, so funny, I interviewed her, and then I think she quit after the first day, or maybe didn't even come. I can't remember now, which just tells you everything that's happened since then. But I've had silly little things like that to having valued people move on. Real estate's a really high turnover industry. And sometimes it can be tough to keep sales talent for years and years, because sometimes they'll join your team because they don't have any leads. And then over time they build a database and they don't necessarily see the point in staying on the team for 10 or 15 years. So I've definitely had some heartache where people have moved on, and I would look at myself and be oh, why couldn't I keep them? And Should I have spent more time with them? Should I have acted differently in a way that would cause them to want to stay? So I think like just those leadership lessons can be personal. It's one thing to get interviewed for a listing and have them be like, sorry, it's not a fit. I think it's another when you're like pouring into someone and mentoring them and then it doesn't work out. It's just a little bit like of a different level.
Right.
Yeah, hiring, properly assessing if someone was really the right fit. I've made optimistic hires. I've sometimes skipped references and done like skipped that due diligence that might have shown a pattern or a reason why somebody wouldn't stay very long. So yeah, everything in that realm, I'd be happy to dig in and tell you more. But that's been my big group of lessons from like 2014 to 2019. Team
Yeah,
building.
and that's so critical that you said that you can't skip over the things that you know you're supposed to do, because I think we all have done that in some form of business, that we know that we have our foundation, that we need to cross our T's and dot our I's, but then we make more of an emotional decision rather than logical to say, hey, I got to be thinking for the long term. For you, was there one time that you were like, hey, I don't know if this is for me as far as having a team? And if it was, because now you still have a team, and if I'm correct, you have a brokerage now.
I'm actually with eXp Realty, but
Okay.
I have a network of people that I support through eXp.
Got it. Cool. So with that, was there ever a time that you thought that this wasn't for me?
Yeah, like in any moment of weakness, like, why am I doing this?
And how did you overcome that?
Yeah, I will say like I had this little period of time back in, I think it doesn't really matter when, but it was like 3 or 4 years ago. And I had my team had grown a lot, like really quickly. And in a way, like we had grown faster than the number of salespeople that we had and like our administrative system. So it was just very messy. And I decided to part ways with one of my agents and one of our admin, and they've gone on to be really successful. And there were times where I would just like question that decision. And it kind of like it bruised my ego a lot when like they made their big launch announcements and I was like, oh, look at me over here. Like I'm such a loser. Um, like that really tested me. And the thing that helped me the most was to surround myself with, it wasn't a big group, but a couple people who really got what I was going through, who could affirm how I was feeling, and also have been on that journey, gotten to the other side, and could offer those words of wisdom. Because I think entrepreneurship and business ownership and just running real estate teams can be really lonely.
Right.
So yeah, like I just relying on like other people to go through my little emotional journey about it was really valuable. And it's just that commitment. Like I'm not going to give up and I'm not going to let my ego and my feelings get the best of me. But at the same time, like honor how you feel. Like sometimes it really sucks when things don't work out. And it's okay to like be honest about that. And then ideally you keep moving forward.
Right. Yeah, no, I think the biggest takeaway that I heard out of that was make sure that you have a good environment, and it doesn't have to be a big coaching group or whatever. It could be one or two people who you feel like will cheer you on to say, hey, you know who you are. You know that you've gotten yourself to this point, and you, even though you might be now in a little bit of a slump, you can get yourself out of that. I'm going to be here with you to cheer you on. And those are critical because sometimes it's not even the other agents or a colleague. It's just your family. It's your spouse, it's your brother, it's your sister, it's whoever it is. And you're like, okay, yeah, I do. And those are the people who already know you. So they know if they say something, it's genuine to say, hey, remember that one time when you were 12 years old and X happened and you came back from it and you put that smile on your face. And so that's critical. And I hope someone else that's maybe in this crazy time right now of adversity, that they can hear that and they say, okay, who are the people that I got in my circle that can cheerlead me? And then they lean on those people to come out of it. One thing that I want to jump into, because you opened up the gates on it, is eXp Realty. Talk to me about, how did you find out about eXp and why did you make the decision to join eXp?
Yeah, so I've known about eXp for a long time. So a little bit of a history. I worked at Keller Williams from 2015 through 2019. And from 2016 through 2019, I was the manager of a KW franchise. Then I became the part owner of that franchise, and we grew that to be the number one office in Maryland in unit count. And then I helped that group of owners launch a second one and then acquire a third. And in my last year there, I was a general manager over the 3 franchises. So I have a ton of experience with brokerage, recruiting, retaining agents, consulting them, and that whole world, which was an amazing education. So it was my job as a recruiter to know the business model and value proposition of every real estate brokerage in Maryland and how my company at that time stacked up. So what's funny is, as it relates to eXp, for a long period of time, I was so happy where I was, I would have never entertained another option seriously, which is the main objection you get when you're recruiting. People are like, I'm happy where I'm at, where I am. Don't talk to me. I don't want to question it. And that was kind of me. And then as time progressed with everything that I was doing at my prior company, there were just different things that arose over time. And I actually think my experience running 3 franchises heightened the friction that I felt. In the role that I had there, I had a ton of responsibility. And it was like, it was really hard for me to be honest with myself or anyone else, but I actually felt deep down that I was extremely undercompensated for how much work I was doing and how much responsibility that I had. But ultimately, there wasn't like a lot of flexibility in that structure. So actually, as a woman, I committed that sin that you hear about of being undercompensated and never saying a peep. So I say that just because there might be somebody else that resonates with. And like, more importantly, I was looking at my output and like how much I was doing and how much I was responsible for. And that as like a CEO of a company like that, you end up with a million different things on your plate. And I'm smart and I'm driven, and I was pretty good at most of it and really good at little pieces. And then some things like I really stunk at. But I think when you look at a plate like that and you're like, it's only this 20% over here that's actually my passion and my, what do you call it? Like, people call it like your zone of genius. There's a lot of euphemisms for it. But I was like, man, like I'm doing all of this and I feel like I have the weight of the world on my shoulders, but I'm almost becoming like a martyr with it all. And then, so yeah, like the structure wasn't working that well for me. The compensation didn't work. So long story short, and then there were a couple other things that kind of just like knocked me awake where I was like, okay, let me back up and assess what I'm really doing and where I'm doing it. And that was the only time that I looked really seriously at eXp for the first time. I already knew that they had this like awesome revenue sharing model. I knew they had stock. I didn't understand much about it. The thing that really spoke to me though was the idea that I could go work in my zone of genius as an agent and a recruiter and a mentor and people impactor. That's what I'm about. And then I could give up all the other brokerage crap, compliance, retention, technology problems, agents needs. And there was so much that I was like, let me just take that off my plate, which eXp is the brokerage. So it's funny. You're like, do you own your own brokerage? And I'm like, no,
but technically you do
for that. And technically I do because I'm a stockholder. But I guess my point is like, I don't have all that responsibility I used to have, but I have an even bigger financial opportunity for less risk and overhead. So that was really where I saw my path. And I moved over in March of this year and haven't looked back.
Got it. Do you feel like it's the best decision that you've made for your career?
It is. I have to say, I checked my stock account this morning and I'm at $42,000 in stock since joining 7 months ago. And I have to say, I'm so grateful. And I'm also like, oh my God, if I had come here 3 years ago, I can only imagine what my financial picture would look like. So in a way, my blindness and I don't even know what, I just didn't have an open mind, really robbed me of a serious wealth building.
Wow.
From a stock perspective, and then not to mention all the agents that I recruited to that other company, it would be a very different world for me right now. So I'm going to make my dream happen. Yet, like, I definitely cost myself by waiting.
Yeah. Now, a lot of agents that are in that KW world, and from what I heard, they love the fact that they have the profit sharing, which at eXp, there's revenue sharing. And so talk to me about the first time where you somebody that was closed-minded on profit sharing versus revenue sharing. And since you were in that world, can you explain the difference for, anybody that's looking to understand it better?
Have you heard of the term gaslighting? It's funny. I had been indoctrinated to a lot of messaging about eXp that was super negative. Like I had been told that all these things, like you can't rely on revenue share, they could take it away. It's all a myth. The stock is valueless. And I am somebody who's very loyal. So like I took that messaging and just believed it. So like I put no credence in the revenue sharing and stock options. That was my mistake, was buying into what people were saying around me without doing my own research and my own investigation. So that being said, I came to realize not only were those financial vehicles completely legitimate, they were more lucrative and really easy. Speaking of the stock, I buy stock at a 10% discount with every closing, just a small little piece. And that's how I've built the majority of the portfolio that I referenced, is I'm already producing. I'm not doing any extra work.
Right.
And then I'm just building this asset that I would never have had otherwise.
Got it. And so when you came over, was your focus, because some people have went to eXp and they said, hey, you know what? I don't want to do any of the recruiting side of it. Yeah. I only want to just keep selling real estate the way that I'm selling. And then obviously I'll be able to keep more money in my pocket. For you, was that your focus, or did you really come over looking, hey, I'm going to grow a big team?
That's an amazing question. So I had been a recruiter with a quota for 3 years, and I was so burned out by the end of it. So when I came over to eXp, I was like, I am not going to chase anybody. If somebody wants to come work with me and be in my little world and learn from me and feed off of my energy, they are totally welcome, but I am not going to chase anybody. And it's been a breath of fresh air, just like on a personal note, having had I had to bring in 10 heads a month at my old company, like no matter what. And that was like shoved down my throat, like on a weekly basis. So on a personal note, I was like, I'm going to do the exact opposite of that, focus on my real estate team, take good care of my clients, good care of my team members. And I know that like those opportunities, like I'm going to attract them and they're going to come along in their own time. So I've been blessed to build a revenue share organization in eXp, and it's respectable. I think I have 115 people in my overall tree as of this morning, with just a couple people under me and the rest being organic growth over 7 months. And I'm just now in a mode where I'm like, okay, I think I'm like, I needed a little bit of that like minute to just get back to my own center and foundation. And now I'm at a point where I'm like, I'm really ready to mentor and build a tribe and like figure it out, kind of experiment, see feels like it's a match to be in like masterminds with me, and see where it goes. So I'm just like gearing up, but it's going to be from a place of attraction and people who want to learn like the stuff I've talked about today. If they want to learn about referrals and team building and business building and just want someone they can rely on. So I just want to be that person, but without pushing it on people or needing them, like feeling like I expect something of them in return, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it 100% does. Has there been a book or a podcast besides the DreamNation podcast that has really helped to accelerate your thought process over these last, let's even say 3 years? Has there been anything that you always turn to help you grow your mindset when it comes to real estate specifically?
With real estate specifically, I was actually going to say, I read a book this time a year ago that guided the decisions I've made that was called The Big Leap. It's really good. It actually gets into that zone of genius that I referenced when I was assessing what was on my plate. So not real estate specific at all, but it is a really good guide to making those kind of decisions and figuring out how can I work more naturally within my talents and expand upon those and just drop my weaknesses to whatever extent is like humanly possible with the way our businesses are structured. So that is one of the most impactful books that I've read recently. And then the other book that I take it back to all the time is The 4 Agreements. Have you read that?
Never heard of that.
Okay. It's like, I'm not sure exactly how to describe it. It's a little bit spiritual, and I read it back when I was like 18 for the first time. I got sober when I was 17, and I've been in recovery for 17 years now. So it's been a long journey. And that was the very first like spiritual book that I ever read when I was first like figuring out how to be, an emotionally balanced, emotionally intelligent human. And the book is just filled with wisdom. A lot of people take a lot from it. So I feel like anybody who's on a journey of wanting to take things less personally and be a person of integrity and kind of walk through how to do that, it's a goodie, and it's not very long.
Yeah. Cool. No, I'll definitely look at it. I'm a huge reader, so I love podcasts. I love books, and that's one that I've never ever heard of on either show. I've never heard anyone reference it. So I'll definitely listen to it. But one thing, I think you gave us a cliffhanger here, and you talked about getting sober at the age of 17.
Yes.
If you don't mind me asking, if you're willing to share, what were you getting sober from?
Drugs, alcohol, and just being
At that early of an age?
Yeah.
So at what age did it start for you?
Pretty much like my freshman year in high school. So it was a short, stressful journey.
3 to 4 years.
From like freshman year to senior year, and addiction runs in my family. And I had self-esteem issues. But I think ultimately, like, some of our brains are just more vulnerable to how we react to substances. And that was what gave me comfort. I had a lot of social anxiety growing up too, was always really worried about being accepted and liked. And I think anything that was like an anesthetic for that was something that I wanted more of, and wanted to just be anesthetized all day, every day. So like my high school journey was really bumpy. And then my parents actually sent me away. I finished high school at this wilderness place in West Virginia. And that was where I had like my first awakening of just realizing, up until then, I thought that all of the problems I was experiencing were the fault of other people or just bad luck. And there's something about when you just have to confront who you are with no distractions. The wilderness is a great place for that. I was like, oh no, I'm the problem. And substances fuel the fire. And once I start, I can't stop. And then I got into 12-step recovery, and I've been lucky like that it's stuck. Like statistically, I think only like 10% of people that try and get sober stay. I've heard different numbers, but like it's hard. And I was starting college and didn't have a lot of tools to deal constructively with life, with myself, with my feelings. Yeah. And then I got into real estate right in that mix, like shortly thereafter. And I have to say, the thing I love about real estate, among many other things, is that it's such an entrepreneurial business that it can be a vehicle for whatever you want. So for me, it's a vehicle of having space in my life to do other things that feed me spiritually, to have control over my life, but also to be of service to others and whatever that looks like. So I feel like real estate has been a place where I can like be pretty authentic about expressing who I actually am and what my experiences are. I don't know, if I worked at some big corporation, I probably wouldn't talk on a podcast about my history, but I just feel like secure. No one can take my security away from me because I'm in charge of my own business, and I am who I am.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. I feel like that was something that we should have talked about in the beginning, but I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm sure anybody else that wasn't already wowed by your journey, how you articulate yourself and all of the wisdom that you've given off, is definitely now when they hear the backstory, they're like, wow, like she's somebody who I got to stay connected with. So thank you for sharing again. The last question, actually, there's 2 final questions that I have for you. The first one is, if there's one thing that if you could go back, you would have either changed or implemented sooner to accelerate your dream on your journey, what would that one thing be?
I think the leadership lessons that I've had have been invaluable. So I wouldn't want to take back any of those tougher experiences that I referenced today. I have to say, though, I actually was interviewed by somebody else this morning on a completely different topic. And what ended up coming out of my mouth was like, I really regret not joining eXp sooner. I hate to sound like that person, but again, like my financial picture, if I joined 2 to 3 years ago, would be so different than it is today. So if I could rewind and just recalibrate the decisions I made back then, I think that would be the one.
Cool. Wow. That's a big one. It's the first one that we've heard on that one, but I'm glad you shared it. And then the last thing that I have is, there's somebody out there that's watching this or listening to this, and they have that little voice in their head that we've all experienced. And that little voice says that they're not strong enough, they're not smart enough, or maybe they just don't have enough resources. What's the one thing that you would leave this person with for them to just take action?
Gosh, the first thing that comes to mind is you are not alone. I still struggle with those thoughts, especially when I'm in uncharted territory. There are times, I think, in all of our lives where we are in the growth zone and figuring it out. And then we reach that plateau, which is more comfortable, but can have its own associated pain of, oh no, I'm at a plateau. What am I going to do about it? What do I want to do next? But I think like the downside of being a growth oriented person and putting yourself in those situations is that it doesn't always feel good. Like I have this idea of this thing that I want to do along with my real estate business. And I've just been back in that exact space that you described. 3 weeks ago, I had this idea and I was like, this would be amazing. And then what crept into my mind were like the doubts and the reasons why it may not work out. And I was like, oh man, like, where's my confidence? But then I was like, well, I haven't done this other thing before. And this is what it felt like when I was brand new, and was just like, where can I find a referral? So I feel like it's just like a cycle that repeats. So knowing you're not alone, that it's natural, you're putting yourself in a growth situation. And again, reach out, tell somebody. I think a lot of the time we suffer in isolation instead of just sharing with somebody like, here's what's going on.
Right.
A burden shared is a burden lessened in my experience.
That's a nugget right there to leave us with. We will put all of the links to everything you've mentioned in the show notes today. But for anybody who wants to stay connected with you, where can they find you at?
So 2 places I would say, follow me on Instagram. My stories are where I share just a lot of like my day to day. It's a mix of personal, but also a lot of my different business ventures. And then if you're more of a Facebook person, follow me on Facebook. But I'll just say my stories are more like the me of like connecting with me, and feel free to private or direct message me if you have questions about anything that I talked about today.
Cool. It's been an honor to have you on here today. And just as she said, DreamNation, you have to share it and you have to take action, because otherwise that dream that you have will only merely be a fantasy. That's all we have for this one. We'll catch you on the next one. First, I want to say thank you for allowing me to walk with you on this real estate journey. If you've gotten anything out of this episode, do me a favor and head on over to iTunes if you have access and leave me a review. My whole goal is to make sure that I'm serving you all the right way. You're my tribe. You're who I care about. You're why I do this. So if you want to give me any type of thanks, or if you want to let me know whatever your thoughts or your feelings are from this episode or any other episode that you've listened to, leave me a rating or review. And also, if you're looking for more tips, strategies, and even resources when it comes to leveling up your real estate game, head on over to DreamNationAcademy.com. We have a really cool real estate section there, and it's something that I wish that I would have had when I first got started in real estate. So that's DreamNationAcademy.com. Don't wait. I'll see you on the other side.